You won't believe what people once did in search of gold. Entire expeditions vanished, civilizations were destroyed, and lives were lost, all for a kingdom that may have never existed. If you can't listen right now, save this episode and follow the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Because today we're diving into the myth that turned men into monsters and rivers into graves. The legend of El Dorado. In the dense forests of Colombia, long before European ships touched South American shores, there were whispers of a ritual so dazzling it felt impossible. A king, covered in gold dust from head to toe, would sail to the middle of a sacred lake. There, in silence, he would offer treasures like gold, emeralds, and sacred relics to the gods by casting them into the water. The lake would shimmer under the sun, glowing like a portal to another world. This was not fantasy. This was a real ritual performed by the Muisca people at Lake Guatavita. When Spanish conquistadors first heard of this ceremony, they didn't understand it as spiritual. They saw it as proof that there existed a kingdom where gold flowed freely and temples were made of treasure. El Dorado, the golden one. At first, they thought it was a man, then a city, eventually a whole empire. And so the obsession began. In 1541, Gonzalo Pizarro led hundreds of men into the Amazon rainforest looking for this golden paradise. They faced starvation, disease, betrayal, and madness. Most never returned. The jungle swallowed them. Those who did make it back spoke of a land cursed by riches, where gold was more abundant than bread, but impossible to take. The myth only grew stronger. For over 2 centuries, European adventurers searched for El Dorado. They dove into lakes, burned villages, bribed and tortured locals, all in pursuit of this impossible dream. But El Dorado was never found. Instead, explorers found themselves lost in a land that resisted being conquered, a land that protected its secrets. Yet the story didn't die. It evolved. El Dorado became more than a place. It became an idea, a symbol of greed and glory, a warning wrapped in gold. And here's the twist. What if the true meaning of El Dorado was never about finding a city, but about what happens to people when desire consumes them? What if the Muisca ritual wasn't meant to attract wealth, but to let it go? The journey to El Dorado didn't just reshape maps, it reshaped minds. In part 1, we followed the rise of the legend, born from a Muisca ritual and twisted by conquistadors into a fever dream of gold. Now it's time to dive deeper into the real setting of this myth. Lake Guatavita. Nestled in the mountains northeast of Bogotá, Lake Guatavita is nearly perfect in shape, a quiet circle of green water surrounded by forest. For the Muisca people, this was not just a lake, it was a sacred gateway, a place where offerings were made to the gods of creation, fertility, and the sun. Every new ruler, known as the Zipa, would be covered in gold dust and taken by raft to the center of the lake. There, he would cast treasures into the water while his people watched in reverent silence from the shore. This was not greed, it was gratitude. Gold to the Muisca was not currency, it was spirit, a symbol of the sun's power, something to be honored and given back, not hoarded. But when the Spanish arrived, they saw the lake as a vault, and they wanted to crack it open. Over the centuries, several attempts were made to drain Lake Guatavita. In the 1500s, a team dug a channel through the side of the crater, causing a partial collapse that lowered the water level. Dozens of gold items were recovered, tiny figures, animals, jewelry. It was enough to feed the obsession, but not enough to satisfy it. In the 1800s, British engineers tried to drain it again using steam-powered pumps. They found even less. and by the 20th century the Colombian government finally put an end to the digs, declaring the site protected. Still, the legend refuses to die. Modern archaeologists have confirmed that the Muisca did in fact perform rituals at Lake Guatavita, but there's no evidence of a golden city nearby. No streets paved with treasure, no temples built of emerald walls. What existed was more profound, a culture that treated gold as sacred, not as wealth. And here's where it gets fascinating. While the Western world hunted El Dorado for what it could gain, the Muisca were using gold to give thanks. While conquistadors imagined endless riches, the real story was about spiritual balance, a society that placed harmony above possession. El Dorado, then, was never lost. It was never meant to be found. It was meant to be understood. The legend of El Dorado didn't stay buried in the jungle. It kept moving, shape-shifting with every retelling. What began as a Muisca ceremony turned into a Spanish obsession, then a European mystery, and now lives on in global culture as a metaphor for the impossible dream. But why does this story still capture our imagination centuries later? Because El Dorado isn't just about gold. It's about the idea that somewhere, out there, lies the one thing that will make everything worth it. A treasure so great it will justify the risks, the losses, the madness. For some, it's wealth. For others, success, fame, love, or meaning. The myth survives because it mirrors something in all of us, a longing that never quite disappears. Writers, filmmakers, and explorers have kept El Dorado alive in countless forms. From the search for lost cities in adventure films to novels where characters chase their own versions of paradise. Even today, people still hike through Colombia and Venezuela looking for clues. Not because they truly expect to find a golden city, but because the myth gives shape to a timeless human question. What would you risk everything for? And yet, the lesson of El Dorado may not lie in the search, but in the misunderstanding. The gold that the Muisca offered was never meant to be owned. It was meant to be released. Letting go was the ritual. Gratitude was the purpose. But when outsiders arrived, they inverted the meaning. They tried to take what was meant to be given. That's why the real tragedy of El Dorado is not that it was never found, but that the world refused to believe it had already existed, in a different form. One that required reverence, not conquest. So here's the reflection. What are you chasing today? Is it something that feeds your spirit, or only your hunger? Are you looking for El Dorado, or trying to build it? If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something deeper, save it, share it. Follow the channel for more legends that hold mirrors to our modern lives. Because sometimes the oldest myths are the ones that still understand us best.